Arf!
Nickelodeon. Arf!
Nickelodeon.
Just trying to get us in the mood there.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, one of those old bumpers from 30 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, 30 years ago. 30 years ago, Double Dare went on the air for the first time. We first met Mark Summers, the host, and we also heard the voice of Double Dare for the first time, Harvey, also known as John Harvey from Philadelphia Radio. John, can I call you? Just call you Harvey?
Yeah, please do. Don't call me John, whatever you do.
Okay, good.
No,
That's good.
Nobody calls me that.
No, okay. I didn't even know that that was your first name. I always thought your first name was Harvey.
Well, I kept it a pretty well-guarded secret for a while, but, you can only... After 22 years, word got out, so I just gave up on it.
Oh, okay. So, Harvey, you were in Philadelphia radio for a long time before you made it onto Double Dare. Why did you get involved in radio? What made you? What turned you on to radio?
Well, I'll try to give you the short version. I'm a senior in high school. I meet my guidance counselor for the first time about February or March of my senior year. And she says, "What are your plans?" And I said, "I'm going to be a rock star." And she said, "Do you want to have a fallback plan, maybe?" And I said, "Well, okay. What'd you have in mind?" She said, "How about applying to school?" So I said, "Where do you want me to go?" She said, "Westchester's nearby." So I went to Westchester State College, it was called, Pennsylvania. And on the application form, you had to pick a major, and they were in alphabetical order. So I was an anthropology major for 2 years. And after 2 years, I discovered I hated anthropology. And so I'm looking at college catalogs. I see Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, has a radio, TV, film major. And I went, wow, look at these courses. They look like fun, editing film and doing documentaries, blah, blah, blah. So I applied at Ohio University, and I applied at Temple. Ohio University was about $1,500 a semester. Temple was $435.
Oh, my God.
So, and I was working my way through college, so I picked Temple. So I major in radio, TV, and film, and I start to like what I'm doing. And then in my senior year, again, no plans, no motivation, but I ran into a guy who used to work at WIOQ as a news person, and he had just run into the program director and knew he had a weekend newscaster opening. So he did the go-between, sent a note to the program director and said, "You should see my friend." And so he said, "Bring a resume and a tape in." I didn't have either because I'd never been on the air in my life. So I never did make a resume, but I grabbed a newspaper, wrote some news headlines, and at Temple, they had studios and stuff, so I recorded a couple of minutes of news. I brought in a reel-to-reel tape on a Wednesday, I think, for the interview. He called me Thursday and said, "Can you start Saturday?" That's how desperate he was. So I went on the air March 31st, 1973, without having ever done anything in my life on the radio. And there's a recording of that first newscast that I was about 30 seconds late for. It's the worst thing you've ever heard. I used to play it on my anniversary shows just because people couldn't believe how bad I was.
Oh, man.
And so then I spent years. Well, you guys know, there's no way to learn how to be on the radio or host TV shows or anything like that in broadcast without doing it, and doing it really badly for quite a while until you get better at it. And usually what happens is you work in really, really tiny stations in really small markets around the country, and you try to work your way up. But keep in mind, this is 1973, and at this point, FM still had not cleaned AM's clock. FM was just still they would throw in an FM station when you bought an AM station. They'd throw in an FM signal for free. That was still going on because every big station was still, the dominant AM stations in Philly, WIP, WIBG, WFIL, all of those. So I started at IOQ. I lasted in the daylight hours 2 weekends. But the program director's name was Roy Lawrence, and I owe him my entire broadcast career because instead of firing me, which any reasonable person would have done because I was so bad. He put me in the graveyard shift overnight from 11 at night until 7 in the morning on the weekend. And, I learned how to write news and deliver news. And then I kept bugging him, come on, Roy, let me jock. So in that first year, maybe the end of the first year at the station, they changed. When I first went there, the format was, I swear to God, the format was called Housewife. It was like an elevator, but more boring. So then they changed the format sometime around late 74, 75, I think, to disco. We were the first disco station in Philly. And Roy, after me pestering him for a year, said, all right, I'll give you the overnight show in this new disco format. And I thought, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. So I have a 6-hour music show from midnight to 6 nights a week. And in that format, you played the hot 14 records 3 times a night. So when I would pull into work, and if I heard Kung Fu Fighting at 1 o'clock in the morning, I knew that I would hear Kung Fu Fighting 2 more times every night of the week, 6 nights a week. I wanted to kill myself.
Oh, my gosh.
Disco. Oh, God. Doctor's Orders, Kung Fu Fighting, the Bee Gees. I wanted to blow my brains out. So then they changed the format again, late 75, 76, to album-oriented radio. At this point, it was progressive FM, which meant that the jocks came in, stared at a wall of 10,000 albums, thought, what do I want to hear? Let me start with something by Billy Joel, and then, let me play something by Joel Zoss, because they have the same name, and then let me play something, that sounds like Sauce, whatever. You'd try to do something thematic on the radio, and the jock had the ability to program the entire show. You picked the music. Now, there were check marks on every album saying these 4 or 5 or 6 cuts on the album are the selected cuts, but as long as you didn't, the other rule was don't play the same song within 24 hours. But other than that, it was completely up to the jock to create the show. And that, had happened when Progressive FM first started to explode and burst on the scene late 60s, early 70s. And we did that for a couple of years until maybe around 77, 78, when we then began to be programmed. First it was cards, you'd flip to the next card and it would tell you play Paul McCartney and Wings or whatever. So the jock no longer had the control. And I believe that IOQ was the last successful progressive FM freeform station in America to go down in flames. Because after that, everything was programmed to the point where, of course, now instead of cards or whatever, it's all, run by a computer program that for almost every format you can name plays 500 records, and they mix them up, and that's a format. No matter what format you name, 500 songs that they play, and that's radio. So I learned how to do it excruciatingly badly in front of everyone. My huge break was I got to learn how to do it and be bad in Philadelphia, which was at that point the 4th biggest market in the country. I think it's slipped to number 6 or 7 at this point. But at that point, it was the 4th market, and nobody. After about 1980, and FM was really successful now and was starting to, really just, gun down all the AM stations, and the dynamic was shifting. After that, nobody would ever get a chance to start out at a top 10 market station. You had to work your way up. I got to do it just out of sight, in the graveyard shift overnight when it didn't do too much damage. So that's how I got started in radio, totally by accident.
That's a real lucky break for you. I mean, that's such a great story, Harvey.
As I say, nobody would get that chance these days, I don't think. I just can't imagine anybody getting a shot like that. So it was up. I'm not saying that I eventually was completely devoid of talent. I think my ability is, when you get to be my age, you figure out what you're good at and what you're not so good at. And one of the things you can tell from that story, like I picked a major in college because they were in alphabetical order. I've never had a 1-year plan, 5-year plan, 10. I've never known what I'd be doing in 5 years. I just never had a vision or a goal. But what I am good at is making the most of what I stumble into. And I stumbled into some just great stuff. And one of the things I stumbled into was, Double Dare. I had just been fired from IOQ after almost 14 years.
Oh, man.
So, and it at that point, I mean, the station's ratings were terrible, but people liked me. I had been number one for a short time. I don't know, a year, maybe a year and a half, 2 years at the most, something like that. But when you're number one, that's the one that they aim at. And the morning zoo on MMR came into town in DeBella, and they took aim at me, and they just destroyed our station's ratings and my ratings. They just slowly went down and down, and eventually they fire you. But I was looked at, for whatever reason, after being there 14 years. I was looked at very sympathetically, so I had a ton of really great press after getting fired. I mean, articles in the paper, a lot, not just the day after I got fired, but they kept writing stuff. They did editorials. They did Signe Wilkinson in the Daily News did an editorial cartoon. She did a caricature and did an editorial cartoon about me. It was like, oh my God! If I hadn't just been fired and devastated, I'd never be happier than I am right now. So I was getting a lot of good publicity and press and whatever. And that was the summer of 1986 when Nickelodeon happened to be coming down from New York to. They decided to shoot at WHYY, the TV facility, the studios there, out of town from New York because it's cheaper. It's just less expensive to shoot a show in Philadelphia than it was in New York City. So they were coming to Philly. They had selected the host of the show, but they didn't have an announcer. And one of the production people on the show, they hired a whole lot of people from Philadelphia, obviously, because when you go to a city to work, you hire local rather than have to bring people in and put them up in a hotel. So one of the production people was a fan and a listener of mine, and she said, I know of somebody who'd be great to be the announcer on the show. She called me. She said, would you be interested? And I said, well, sure. So I made a tape, I think, and sent them a tape of something. I have no idea what. I just remember it was a cassette tape. And they said, great, you're hired. So then I began my really rugged negotiation process. I said, what do you want to pay? And I don't even remember what they said, but I said, I'd like it to be union so that I could keep, getting pension benefits under AFTRA. And they said, well, if you want it to be union, we'll cast somebody else. And I said, when do I start? Because at that point, I was fired, completely out of work. I had no leverage.
Yeah.
I was a nothing, a nobody. I had been working on television for only about 3 or 4 years at that point. I had been on Evening Magazine since about 81. But I was a complete unknown, and I had no television credentials or chops to slap them across the face with. So when they played hardball, I crushed and melted immediately and said, "Great, sounds great to me. When do I start?" So I got the gig. We started out, and the first 15 episodes we shot or whatever, I was off camera like an announcer, like Johnny Olsen or whatever. Tell them what they've won, Harv. Right. It's a new computer, and it would have been that kind of a gig with an announcer, just a disembodied voice, and nobody would ever have seen me. But this was Nickelodeon, and these were run by relatively young people. So the exec producer, the director, the creators of the show, they were young and kind of, they were creative types, and they wanted to play around. And this was a really new thing for Nickelodeon. There wasn't one of these. There was no game show just for kids, especially a sloppy, messy kids game show. So they were experimenting, and one of the either the director or one of the exec producers said to me, well, we want you to do this little bit on camera with Mark. And I don't even remember what it was, but they, it was probably a 15, 20-second bit. It was a little bit of back and forth, just goofing around. So I presume I didn't stink up the room too bad because, 5 shows later, they threw me another bit and then another little bit. And by the end of the first 65 episodes, I had kind of wormed my way into being more of like second banana sidekick rather than unseen off-camera announcer. And it was because they threw me a bone and gave me a chance to do something on camera that the show turned into something. It would have been huge for Mark, of course, no matter what. But I could have been unknown, completely anonymous, and not a big deal at all. As it turned out, I got to be the sidekick, and I was on camera, at least a few times in almost every episode. And I got, the kids knew who I was, and it was Mark and Harvey, and we toured together, and we'd do stuff together, and it turned into a big deal. And Double Dare, almost immediately, some shows take a while to build, but Double Dare really took off really fast. And by the end of them showing those original first 65 episodes, Nickelodeon had its biggest first huge hit on their hands, and we got a ton of publicity, and we just kept shooting shows, and we were in production for 7 years, I think, until '92, and we must have shot between 500 and 600 episodes. We stayed in Philly for a couple of years, and we went to New York for a couple of years, and eventually ended up moving to Orlando, Florida, at the new Universal Studios down there, and did the last, I'd say, 3 years or so down at Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida, and just kept cranking out the shows, and it was a wild ride. It was so much fun, and because they let the inmates run the asylum, and so we got to try anything. And I was so delighted to be a part of the show and to be like on it. And I said, look, I'm up for anything. I'm totally game. You got a new obstacle you want to throw me into and get me completely slimed up. That's great. Here's my only ground rule is like, if it's on the show, I'll do anything you ask of me. It'll be great fun. If it's just for the cruel enjoyment of the crew and the exec producers, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
But if it's on camera and it gets on the show, then knock yourselves out, use me and abuse me. And they did. And I got to do just a ton of the goofiest things. And they would try stuff. What they did, which is so rare, was that they let you try, and some of them failed. Sometimes we just fell flat on our face. But instead of panicking, doing a focus group, tightening up the format of the show, blah, 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 seeing how you could make it, so much more powerful in, 18 or kids, 7 to 13-year-olds, whatever. They just said, oh, that really sucked. I hated that. Let's try another one. and that was the really wonderful, playful spirit of the show for its entire run, really, no matter where we shot it. We still fooled around and tried to have fun, and we ended up trying to do a show that was great for kids, but that we knew the parents would probably, some of them would be watching, and we threw in jokes for the grown-ups, references that no kid would ever get, but we thought that the grown-ups might find funny, and we did stuff like that.
That's right.
It was a lot of fun, and we got away with amusing ourselves as well as doing a show aimed at kids.
That's right. What was a typical tape day like? Because that's got to be physically exhausting to do the front game and then about 4 or 5 obstacle courses at one time.
Yeah, it was a grueling schedule. I'll give you for instance, when we were at Universal Studios in Orlando, because that in some ways that was my favorite part of the show, simply because we were on a movie lot. It was everything I grew up seeing. I mean, Johnny Carson was my first broadcast hero. Letterman was probably my second biggest broadcast influence. I just loved everything about him. And I saw pictures of the Tonight Show set, the lot, Johnny Carson driving onto the lot. So we're at Universal Studios, and there are, many big sound stages, and Nickelodeon had, one huge sound stage that was Nickelodeon's to do with as they will for a 10-year period of time. That was the agreement. So I would get, when we would go to, it would take a month to shoot 65 episodes. Now, I was, at this point, by 87, I was working on my second morning radio show on MGK in Philadelphia. So when we would go down to Orlando, I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd drive to a radio studio in Orlando, and I'd do my radio show from 5:30 in the morning until 9. Then I'd get in my little rental car, and I'd drive to Universal Studios. And I'd drive onto the lot, and this was the part that just delighted me no end. I'd drive onto the lot, and there was a gate with a guard, just like you saw on TV at Warner Brothers or Paramount or wherever. So I'd drive onto the lot. There's a gate at the guard. He'd recognize me. He'd say, "Morning, Harvey," and raise the little barrier and wave me through. I'd drive onto a parking space that had a little sign with my name on it. I'd walk into a huge sound stage. I'd go to a dressing room with a door with a little star and my name on it. I mean, does it get any better than that? Oh, my God.
Not at all.
It was like dying and going to heaven. It was a dream come true. So then I'd get to Universal about 9:30, 9:45. I'd change into my, outfit that I wore on the show. We'd shoot from, around 10 in the morning until about 5 or 6 at night. We'd try to do 5 shows a day. And then after the shows, we'd go over the day. We'd talk about what obstacles worked, what didn't work. We'd look at new physical challenges or obstacles for the next day. We'd test stuff on the floor with the crew. We'd plan bits that we were going to do the next day. Then we'd go eat dinner, and then we'd fall into bed. I'd get up at 4 the next morning and do it all over again for a month, for 4 weeks in a row, about every 3 to 5 months. That was my life. And you were exhausted by the end of the month, but it was so exciting to be part of it that it kind of carried you through until absolute collapse at the very end. But then you had a few months to rest up until you had to do it again.
That's right.
So it was really, it was a lot of fun.
Exactly.
It really was.
Now, you said before that Nickelodeon never had anything like this, and it shows during the taping of the first episode where they had to run the obstacle course 4 times because twice the flag was not in the pillow where it was supposed to be.
That was the one with the that was supposed to be the flag hidden in the obstacle. And the first time we did it, 60 seconds goes by, the kid never finds the flag. I can't remember whether that time there was actually a flag in it. One of the times I know they forgot to put the orange flag inside this pillow filled with feathers.
Yeah.
So we shot it. Second time, no flag. Third time, no flag. I think we did shoot it 4 or maybe 5 times until the kid finally found the flag and was able to move on to obstacle 2. Out of 8, obviously. I have no idea how far we got, but it was just excruciating to try to get the show up on its feet. Nobody knew how to do it. It's like Mark had worked on and around game shows, and I can't remember. I think some of the writer producers also had done some game show stuff, but not a lot. And Mark had been he'd been audience warm up, and it just done various jobs. Mark, worked his way up. He had moved to L.A. in the early 70s, and he would do whatever it took to get in the door. That's what he ended up doing, hosting TV shows. That's what Mark Summers wanted to do his whole life. He was unlike me. He had absolute goals and a crystal clear image of what he wanted to do, and he wanted to be on television. He wanted to be a host, and he loved game shows. So he knew lots about game shows, and so but knowing about them and then trying to actually do it are 2 very different things. And it took us a while,
right?
But by about 20 episodes in, we'd kind of gotten it down, And eventually, even in that first season, we did get to the point where we could shoot 5 a day, which really is cranking them out.
Absolutely. Now, I heard from a couple of sources that at one point you filled the tank with baked beans. Is this true?
Oh, yeah. The baked bean. Can I tell you the baked bean story?
Yeah, please do.
We had this big, long, with clear, thick lucite-sided tank, and we put balloons in it. We put those kind of Nerf ball things, the kind of balls that you get at Chuck E. Cheese, those color balls that the kids play around in, and a bunch of other things. And I'm going to say that the tank was about 4 feet high, about maybe 5 feet wide, and 15, 16 feet long. It was pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was filled with various items. And one time they got the bright idea that it would be really cool to fill this tank with baked beans. And these were all, one of the criticisms of the show that happened early on was they say that you're wasting food. And I mean, honestly, sometimes we probably did. If you're going to do stuff with eggs, you need eggs.
Yeah.
And so it's you're not going to use rancid eggs because you got kids diving into them. So, we wasted dozens of eggs. But a lot of the food was what's called post-dated. Big government surplus cans that have an expiration date. And after the date, you're not allowed to sell it for food anymore. Now, it doesn't instantly, on October or whatever, it doesn't instantly turn awful. It's still good. It's just legally you're not allowed to sell it. So here's all these cans of crap just sitting around, vanilla mayonnaise, whatever, and you can't sell it. So they might have even given it to us. I don't even know. So we had all these cans of crap, and we got our hands on outdated baked beans in those big giant cans, and they filled that tank probably 2 feet up with baked beans, and then the rest probably with water. So it was a big baked bean mess. And once it took a long time to load that many baked beans, and so once you load the tank with baked beans, you want to get your money's worth. So we shot with the baked beans all week long. So 5 shows a day, 5 days, hot studio lights, kids in and out of baked beans, just sitting there, just going ranker and more fetid and disgusting as the week went on. The end of the week, you got to clean out the tank. So who do you call? You call a guy with a honey wagon. That's the big truck that comes around and sucks out septic tanks. So the guy parked, this was where we were still in Philadelphia, the guy parked out on Arch Street, ran a long hose, a big 8-inch hose, into the studio and sucked out the tank full of week-old baked beans under the hot studio lights. At the end of it all, he put his gear and his equipment, rolled up his hose. He came back in, and he said, "You know what I do for a living, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You know what I'm sticking that hose down in and sucking out all day long, right?" Septic tanks, right? He said, "This is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life." So I thought, from the guy who spends his day sucking out septic tanks and human waste, we grossed him out. I thought, what a great week.
Absolutely. And then there's this one time that you were taping Super Sloppy Double Dare for the weekend. It was like a weekend Saturday morning thing. And one day, Mark Summers is describing the tank, and there's this little wind-up toy of the guy rowing, and he loses it. And so I was wondering, what happened to that wind-up toy?
I think somebody gave it to Mark at the end of that episode, just as a keepsake, a memento, because it was just so ridiculous. We had it was probably the end of a week. We were in New York City shooting for that one, and this might have been the syndicated version. At one point we were shooting a syndicated versions for the Nickelodeon network, and a nighttime version for the Fox TV network.
Yeah.
We were when Fox first began their fledgling television network, there had only been 3 before that: ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox went on the air, and I forget the date, 87, 88, something like that.
Something like
and
that.
One of the first 3 shows on the brand new Fox network was Super Sloppy Double Dare, I think, or I might have been Family Double Dare, but it was a different version slightly of the show, and we had 4 on a team rather than 2.
Yeah.
So we were shooting so many versions of the show. We were in New York, and it was the end of a week, and we might have even shot 5 or 6 that day, and Mark was exhausted. We were all beat up. And so somebody on the crew got the bright idea to stick this little wind-up rowing doll that just kept rowing in the middle of the obstacles, and Mark saw it on the first obstacle, and he just started to laugh. And then he goes to the second one and starts to explain it, and all of a sudden he sees it, like, I don't know, under the big piece of fake pepperoni on the pizza or something. There's a little rowing man rowing away. He starts to dissolve in like schoolgirl laughter. He just loses it. He gets that high pitched, and his eyes are watering, and he can't even get words out. He just throws it to me, and then I have to say, well, you got, space camp or whatever it was. and they kept moving it to each obstacle, and he was just like sobbing, laughing hysterically by the end of it. It was just one of those, and they kept it in. I mean, that's the way the show aired.
That's right. I remember
unless it was completely unusable for some reason, we tried to keep, mistakes and warts and all in the show. And I think that's one of the things that endeared it to both the kids and the grown-ups that watched it, was because one of the things that works about a show and makes it compelling to watch is if you sense that you're watching the real thing. Yeah. If you're seeing a bunch of people posing and, pretending to get along and have camaraderie and chemistry that doesn't actually exist, I think most viewers can kind of pick up on that, and they might watch, but they won't find it like the best thing ever. But here were a bunch of people who actually really liked each other, who honestly had a great time doing the show, and really we were enjoying ourselves, and we couldn't believe how stupid we were allowed to be sometimes. And so I think that read on the show, that these guys were authentically just having a great time doing something incredibly goofy and dumb, but fun. And I think that really, that got through, and I think that was one of the components of the show, in addition to the fact that it was actually a really well-structured game show.
Absolutely.
And it was exciting, and you could get to the very end of the game before the obstacle course, and all of a sudden, with the last physical challenge, you could win from being behind. And that's the mark of a well done game show. I mean, that's why Jeopardy and every good game show is written. You think it's easy to make a game show, but there's actually some science to it. And if you have a game where you can be blown out in the first round and never have a chance to come back, no one will watch that game, because it's just, there's no tension, there's no there's no, what's going to happen, and you need that in a game show.
That's
and
right.
The beauty of all the great game shows, like Jeopardy, is like you'd be blown out in the first round, you come back, you got no points. It's Double Jeopardy. Now you get a chance to put more on your scoreboard, and at the very end, the guy who's leading the whole game can blow it with a bad Final Jeopardy answer, and somebody else comes from behind and wins. That's the mark of a great game show, and Double Dare had that, because you could come back from behind at the very end and win it all, and then you got to run the obstacle course and see what happened. And I will say, one of the things that just kind of bothered me when I first got called to audition for it was, I had a thing that I wanted, whatever I did on air, I wanted it to not be mean-spirited. I didn't want to do, insult, shock stuff. I didn't want to make fun of people for the entertainment value. I didn't want to get a laugh at somebody else's expense. Politicians, people who put themselves on display, they're fair game. But like ordinary folks, it's just my rules, just what I came up with myself. It's out of bounds to get your entertainment at somebody else's expense. And I thought, oh God, a game show with kids crawling all over each other just to get things, that could look really distasteful and just like be, oh God, don't we have enough materialistic pressures on kids to get the newest and greatest thing? And so I had that concern going in. I watched 4, maybe 5 shows tape, and I went, these kids don't give a crap about the prizes. They just want to jump in the slime.
Yep.
Oh, my God, this is the best thing ever. And I never worried about it again because it had nothing to do with material goods and owning stuff. The only people that ever gave us the kids were great. There was never a kid who said, that wasn't fair, he cheated, I should have won. Not a kid ever said that. Parents, on the other hand, oh my God. The only complaints or the only problems we ever had was when a parent came up and said, he cheated, that wasn't fair, he should have had another chance. Like the kids, they were great. They were standing there. They only got the 2 obstacles out of 8. They completely flamed out on the obstacle course, and they were covered in goo, and they only won 2 crappy prizes, and they were the happiest they'd ever been in their lives. It always happened that way, and it was just like, wow, that's great to see. It made me so happy to discover that they just wanted to play, and it was a chance to be a rebel and go again. It was an iconoclastic thing. What parents tell you your whole life, don't get messy, we're going to see Aunt Bertha,
right.
Stay clean. Here comes a show that says, hey, see that pile of crap? Jump in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's really cool.
And then, of course,
that's what they cared about, and that's why they wanted to get on the show.
That's right. And then, of course, when Double Dare became successful, you were asked to announce Double Dare's sister show, Finders Keepers. What was that like compared to Double Dare?
It was a little weird, frankly. I mean, I was really happy to be asked to do another show, but I don't know how long it was. A year or year and a half maybe into the run. So by that time, Mark and I were really good friends, and we remain good friends, to this day. And so I was so used to working with Mark and with Robin. We had become really like a tight-knit bunch. And so now I'm on a new show, which was very different. And I was, they would put me on camera only a couple of times, and we tried to do, bits and shtick with me and Wesley Ure, the host of the show. But I didn't know Wesley. He wasn't, he wasn't a game show host. He was an actor, really, and a very nice guy. But he just didn't have quite the feel and command. And I got to tell you, it's so hard to stay in control of a game show with so many elements, flying around. In addition to also trying to be on camera and host and look decent and say words that make sense and keep the score in your head and know where we're going next and who's ahead and who's behind and what part of the game it is, and we'll be right back with whatever will be. There's so many things floating around. It's a really hard thing to do mentally. And, Wesley was a little overwhelmed by it. So there just wasn't the fit and I didn't feel as much a part of that show. It was a wild game. It had a huge set that was a house. They'd built this enormous house with open rooms, and there was some fun to it. But it didn't. And it wasn't the hit ratings wise that Double Dare was. And they did continue it for maybe 2 or 3 more seasons. But after that first season, I was doing the radio show. I was doing Double Dare. Now I was doing Finders Keepers, and I just went to Nickelodeon and I said, "Are you okay if I just drop out of this and just do Double Dare and then do my radio show?" Because I was getting tapped out, and it was a bit too much for me to handle. Because I thought I'm going to be doing a crappy job on everything if I'm trying to do too much. I'd rather do a decent job on the 2 that mattered to me the most. So I left after the first season, and they got somebody else to do it.
Okay.
And that was the first time I ever turned down work in my life, and that's hard to do because in the beginning all you want is work, and it's like you're lucky enough to get some work. It's like, what, you're going to walk away from a gig where they pay you money and get to be on TV once in a while, and it's like, yeah, I think I am, because at that point I thought I had a full plate.
Yeah,
I loved what I was
exactly.
doing, and I wanted to stay with what I was doing.
Harvey, is there a secret to working with kids?
I tell you what, you ask that like you know my answer, but but it's a good leading question, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about. Yes, one of the things, in addition to being concerned about what's the show going to be like, is it going to make kids look like greedy little punks? Another concern I had was that I had, never worked for a kid audience. I had done lots of live shows. I was on the radio. I'd done some television. I'd done 1 million personal appearances. I'd hosted comedy shows. I knew how to work for an adult audience, and I love a live audience. I really do love working in front of a live crowd because the feedback is instantaneous. But kids, well, I don't know anything about working for kids. So when I started out, this was in the first season, within the first couple of weeks, I thought, wow, I guess I just went with an impulse and a gut sort of thing, and I went way over the top with energy, because I guess I thought that's what kids needed or required or demanded. So I was just like giving them that phony, bull, kind of, hey kids, how you doing, and one time, maybe 2 weeks into the first season, some kid in the audience, after something I said with that, fake, overblown, over-the-top energy, the kid just looked me in the eye and mocked me to my face. He said it back to me exactly the way that I had said it. And it was one of the most humiliating experiences in my life, because there I am in front of 400 kids, just been mocked by a 10-year-old who nailed me. The reason it was so embarrassing was the kid got it exactly right. He said, I don't believe you. That's a load of crap. And he mocked me and said it, and I heard the way he said it back to me. And I finished the day, I got through the day, and I went home and I thought about it, and I went, wow, that was devastating. What am I going to do with this? But I sort of had an instinct to what the kid was telling me. And the next day I said, okay, I got to do something different. And so within a day or two, I had found a different approach. And my new approach was, these kids are peers. I'm going to talk to them like this is the hippest audience in a comedy club or whatever. Of course, I couldn't work dirty. I'm working in front of kids.
Yeah.
There are things you can't, lines you can't cross. And not that I never worked filthy, but I liked going up to naughty. I liked skirting the edge and shocking you just a little bit, but hopefully in a smart, intelligent way, rather than just dropping the F-bomb just because you could. That's stupid. That's seventh grade dumbass stuff.
Exactly.
So I loved taking it up to the edge. But with kids, okay, there's an edge with grown-ups, and then here's the edge with kids. But that doesn't mean you got to be inane or dopey or stupid. So I approached them like they were hip. They were going to get every reference that I was going to give them. And I got to tell you, it disarmed the audience. From that point on, they were like in the palm of my hand, because kids never have grown-ups treat them like a peer. Teachers don't treat them that way. Parents don't treat them that way. I'm not saying that parents or teachers necessarily could, but one of the things that I think they got from me was an implied respect. It's like, I trust you to be so cool and so smart and so hip that I can talk to you like I talk to everybody, like a regular person. And they looked at me with, wide eyes like, wow, he thinks I'm like him. And I never, in all those years, I never had a problem. I had one kid in the first couple of years. I had one kid I threw out of the audience. I probably shouldn't have, but I physically picked him up by the arm, pulled him out of the stands, took him to his teacher, and I said, get him the hell out of here. I don't want to see him the rest of the day. Because he said something, I don't even know what it was, but he said something really mean and really nasty to some other kid in the audience or to one of the contestants. He said something real mean that was over the line and just infuriated me. So without knowing it, I just picked him by the arm and said, "You're out of here." One time. 600 episodes of the show, 400 kids in the morning, 400 kids in the afternoon, thousands and thousands of kids. I never had another problem with a kid ever again, because I think because I approached them like they were hip, like they were a peer, and it was way more fun for me. And the kid who mocked me to my face did me the biggest favor in my career, certainly with Nickelodeon. Otherwise I would have been just a piece of crap, really, just a phony poser. The kid mocking me caused me to adjust, and I think I found a way to do it much better than I ever would have without him.
And then all these years later, after all those kids and all that slime, you got out of television and started your own company. Tell us about Harvey the Handyman.
Well, I worked for about 35 years in television. When I got fired from my second radio show, you guys, you work in radio, you know it's not if, it's just when you're going to get fired.
Yep.
And especially if you're the morning man, the morning show, you got all the glory, you got all the attention, you were the one on the billboards, you were the one that got paid the most, but when things go bad, yours is the neck that's sticking up, yours is the first head that gets chopped off. So, I worked 14 years at IOQ, got fired. Worked 8.5, 9 years at MGK, eventually got fired. And that was in '95 from MGK. So at that point, I'd been working 22 years in radio, and I'd been working in television since about 81. So whatever that is, 13, 14 years in TV too. And I thought, I didn't think I would automatically get another great morning show necessarily, but I thought, oh my God, I've been in Philadelphia for 22 years. Everybody knows me. I'm really visible. I've certainly established myself. I should be able to get another show. And I spent 5 years trying to get back on the radio and just couldn't. In the meantime, I got a TV show I hosted a home improvement show for the Discovery Channel called Gimme Shelter for 2 seasons. One of those how-to home fix-up, sort of like This Old House. You go onto a construction site, and today we're going to put in baseboard heating. Here's how it works, kind of thing. And then that show got canceled, and I did another 3 seasons on another Discovery daytime show called Home Matters, and I was sort of like I was the third banana. There were 2 hosts, and I was the third banana. And oddly enough, what I played was Harvey the Handyman. I would do 10, 12 segments a season, telling them how to build things and how to fix stuff. And then that got canceled, and then I worked behind the scenes. I was not able to get on air, on camera anymore, because when you're a 50-year-old bald guy, I know this will shock you, but the offers to host TV shows suddenly dry up and disappear.
Yeah.
So, they want the latest 27-year-old with great hair. So I did what I thought was going to be just like soul-crushing, and I jumped to the other side of the desk and began to produce on a show called Trading Spaces that Banyan Productions produced out of Philadelphia. And I discovered, much to my surprise, that it was delightful, creative, so much fun. I loved my work again, and I worked 7 years on Trading Spaces, and then that got canceled. And then I thought, I'm almost mid-50s at that point, been working 35 years in TV and radio, and I'm working with 20-somethings and maybe somebody who's 31 or whatever. And I thought, I just don't have the fire for this, to keep reinventing myself every, 18 months or whatever. When shows get canceled, TV shows, they just get canceled. So I thought, I might not have the fire for this anymore. And so I took a few months off, and a friend of mine said, almost jokingly, why don't you start your own handyman business? And I was a self-taught carpenter, and I did a lot of work for myself with additions and a whole house restoration for myself, but I'd never worked for anybody else. So I slowly, started to do work for friends. And then I thought, oh, God, nobody's going to trust somebody who shows up in a Subaru Forester and a bunch of Home Depot buckets filled with tools. So I bought a truck and put my logo and sign on it and began to do it, and I've been doing it 10 years. And I love it. I didn't really quite make a living for the first 5 or 6 years. I didn't quite stay even, but for the last 2 years, I've been 14 to 16 weeks backed up with promise projects for a core of loyal repeat customers.
Wow.
And I haven't been able to look at a new customer in almost 2 years, and I'm making a living. I'm not, killing it. It's like there are easier ways to make a living. I'm 65 years old, and I'm doing physical labor for a living.
Yeah.
As my doctor said to me when I went to him for the first time I had 2 elbows that had tennis elbow. They were hurting like hell. He said, "What are you, some kind of putz? You're supposed to have a desk job at your age." But he said, "You're doing this all backwards." But in a weird way, I think I kind of did it the right way, because I'm 65, and I can still carry drywall up 3 flights of steps. And I wake up every day grateful that my body still lets me do what I need to do, and I never take it for granted. And it's probably good for me to finally not be sitting at a desk, just sitting around, decaying at 65 years old. And I'm out being active and physical, and the work is so creative and so much fun, and I never get bored. If I had to do just drywall day after day after day, I think I'd lose my mind. But it's very, very rare that I do the same thing 2 days in a row. So the variety keeps me endlessly interested, and I love the problem solving, and it's really fun and very enjoyable and really satisfying. And and I got used to it. I mean, I don't know how much time you have, but I could tell you a story about the adjustment to going from showbiz to a handyman.
Yeah, please. We're running a little bit short of time, but you can go ahead right now.
Well, just briefly, the first job I did, I showed up at the front desk of a place where the security guard had to let me into the apartment to work, and the woman at the reception desk looked me up and down, called security, and said, "There's a workman here to get into 436." And the word entered my heart like a knife, because I'd been in showbiz prior to that, and she just called me a workman. And after a week, I realized this work has real value. I'm doing something for people that they want, and their lives are better after I've done whatever I did, fixed whatever. And I thought, you can call me whatever you want. I just don't care anymore. So, I went from having one of the cool jobs at a party where everybody, "Oh, you work in television, you work in radio, tell me about it," to "I'm a handyman." "Oh, good. I think I need some dip. I'll talk to you later." But I don't care. It's like I got over that real fast, because I thought, what I'm doing now really satisfies me, and it absolutely has value, and that's all anybody wants to think about what they do.
When you meet kids that watch the show Double Dare, what's their reaction to you, and what's your reaction to them?
They in a small way, they kind of turn back into the age they were watching the show. Yeah. But Mark and I have done a live show for the past several years in Philadelphia at a outdoor beer garden. We call it Drunk Double Dare. And so we have, nuclear physicists. We have, comptrollers, CEOs. We've got people 38, 40 years old who are, movers and shakers who come to watch me and Mark, and they raise their hands, and we get to throw, slime and crap on them, and they turn back into little kids, and they want to get their picture taken, and they're so excited to meet us, and it's really fun, because they're not kids anymore. These are people that otherwise are respected, except when they come out to a beer garden and say, no, throw all that slime on me. And it's so much fun to meet them, and to have them be so excited to meet somebody that they watched as a kid. It's a special place when you're a kid. You're really vulnerable, and you can make an impact. And it's really, really very gratifying to see that the show really made a difference, that we entertained these kids, and that for some of them we were important. That feels great 30 years later.
Absolutely. You made an impact on this kid, let me tell you.
Did you watch?
I did. I was a loyal viewer. In fact, Lee and I and my mom and my sister, we all went to a couple of Double Dare Road shows when you were in Philadelphia.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. In fact, I wanted to be on so bad that I cried my way home when I did not get picked.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
that was Mark's fault, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
I'm sure it was, but at least they let me buy a T-shirt, so I didn't go home empty-handed.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Did you always want to be in showbiz?
I did,
You ended
yeah.
up on the radio?
Yes, I did. I've always wanted, just like Mark, always wanted to be a game show host, and I'm trying to work my way there right now. In fact, I host a game show that I created at my college, Temple. I'm also a fellow Al.
Oh, yeah?
Yep. And if you check it out, it's called Tell All. It's on YouTube, and it's also on TUTV if you ever get a chance.
Well, good. And are you enjoying what you're doing?
Absolutely. I'm loving every minute of it.
Yeah, the dirty, dark little secret is it's the best job in the house, you know? I mean, being a host, being on the air, being on camera, there are a lot of other really good jobs in broadcast, but hosting something, it really is the best job because it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy and not everybody can do it, but a lot of people do a lot of work to make you look good, and all you have to do is have some talent and not screw it up sometimes.
That's true.
So it really is. It's fun.
Absolutely.
It really is a fun way to make
Well,
it. But it's not exactly stable either, as you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. But you said you also keep in touch with Mark and Robin. Would you pass on the message that we'd like to have them on the show too?
Oh, sure. I'll tell them. I believe we're going to, maybe around the first week of November, we're actually getting back together, and we're going to be shooting sort of a Remember This nostalgia 30th anniversary special that's going to air on Nick at Night on, I think, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
That's right.
I don't know much more about it than that, just that they put out a press release on October 6th saying that they were going to do the show. I think it's going to be a half-hour special with me, Mark, and Robin. So we'll be like working together on television for the first time since '92. On television for all three of us.
Absolutely.
Being together again. Mark's done a ton of stuff, obviously, and Robin and Mark did other shows for Nickelodeon. But for the three of us to be together again, that'll be a first in a long, long time.
Absolutely.
So I will pass that on to him.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I can't wait for that special. We're going to be playing the promo during the next commercial break. That's Double Dare 30 special promo. It airs November 23rd on Nick at Night and The Splat.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's on two places.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm telling you this straight from the heart that I can go on for another 2 hours, but unfortunately we're running a little bit short on time. But we would love to have you back on and continue this conversation at a later date.
Well, thanks. I probably should have warned you that I do like to talk, and I can go on and on and on. So,
Harvey,
sorry if I hogged up all the air in the room.
No,
not at all.
This has been great. We think of you as one of the Philadelphia's broadcasting icons, and you definitely deserve that. And we enjoyed this. We've interviewed a lot of broadcasters, but this was one of the most entertaining interviews that I've been a part of. So,
well, thank you, and thanks for remembering the old days. I can't believe it, but I've been off the air on radio about as long as I was on the air now. I mean, I haven't been on radio since 1995, so that's 21 years.
Wow.
And there was a time when I thought that's all I would ever do. I would never not be on the radio because, when you're in the middle of it. So it's been a long time since I did radio. Yeah. And radio's still like one of my favorite memories. Absolutely.
You bet.
Well,
so much fun.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. You have a lot of freedom at times, to do things, and we like this format because it's a talk format, and you kind of we produce the show, so we can do almost anything we want to do.
Well, that is so rare. So hang on to that because I got that opportunity when I was on to create and basically run my own show, and almost nobody gets that chance these days.
No, that's right.
That's great that you guys have that, and it's better that way. I think it's like because you know what you do best, and so you're going to create things on your show that work for you, and not all of them are going to be brilliant, and you're going to fall in your face sometimes. But who cares? It's like as long as your batting average is pretty good, then knock yourself out.
Absolutely.
But if you're afraid to try, that's when everything sounds horrible and lifeless and
absolutely
void of energy and fun. So
well
keep
said,
trying
Harvey.
those dumb ideas that you come up with. I encourage you.
All right, very good. Thank you so much, Harvey. And I promise I won't wait until the 40th anniversary of Double Dare to have you back. I want to have you back on here as soon as possible.
Okay, thanks.